Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our October three-part webinar series, The Human Factor. This webinar is the second part of a three-part series. The CMG Express web series is turning inward this month and focusing on important elements of any community, our people. Last week, the first part of this series was a discussion on conflict prevention and resolution. Part two this week, it will be a discussion surrounding neighborhood support, safety, and security. So our guests this afternoon, we have two guests this afternoon. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining. Our first guest is Joshua VanHooydonk. Joshua is an Ontario licensed condo manager and has been working in community-driven positions for over 10 years. Previously, he's from Toronto originally, and he's worked in large complexes in Toronto as a security supervisor, as well as project coordinator for major construction companies in Toronto. After relocating to Ottawa, Joshua worked in fire prevention, and we are pleased that Joshua has made this move to join CMG team and dedicated himself to a career in condominium management. Welcome, Josh.
Perfect. Thanks, Shelley.
Our second guest this afternoon is Constable Matthew Hunt. Constable Matthew Hunt has been a police officer for 21 years. His expertise is in units, patrol, traffic, schools, neighborhood, community, and crime prevention. He is presently the Crime Prevention through Environmental Design Coordinator for the Ottawa Police. His focus is on proper design and the effective use of space to improve the quality of life in our communities and assisting with crime prevention. Welcome, Constable.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you both for joining today, and let's just jump right into our discussion today. So we have, it's crime prevention through environmental designs, CPTED. CPTED, yes. And it is a public service that the Ottawa Police Service provides, and a prevention strategy. And Constable Hunt, perhaps you could explain a little bit more detail of what exactly this service is.
Okay, sounds good. So first off, thank you so much for letting me speak with you guys today and for attending the webinar. CPTED is a crime prevention strategy. It's a unit within the Ottawa Police Service. We're one of the only services in Canada that has a standalone CPTED unit. And when I say standalone unit, it is me and the unit. So that is the entire unit. So one person. And what I do is I attend different places. In this case, it will be condos. And usually somebody has reached out either through our community police office or from the robbery unit or break and enter unit. And I will attend and speak to, usually it's the property manager, or you know, sometimes they have somebody from their maintenance department there. Sometimes it's the board of directors. And what we'll do is we'll do a walkthrough of the property, inside and outside, focusing mainly on the areas that we feel are of concern. So I'm looking for things like access control. I'm looking for lighting, natural surveillance, possibly video surveillance. I'm looking for territorial reinforcement, signage. So there's a whole host of things that I'm looking for. I'll be making notes during our walkthrough. I'll be asking questions of the people who are joining us on the walkthrough. And after the fact, I'll be producing a report. I'll also be taking photos as we go along. Obviously with the permission of the people that I'm attending with, and I will provide a detailed report, and in the report will be a list of recommendations. Sometimes there's lots of recommendations to make, sometimes there's not so many. It just depends on the property itself. The other thing that's important is it's nice to go there in person I've done a few virtual audits of buildings. Those are tricky to do. I'm more of a visual person. I need to see the space and what the issues are. So like I said, at the end, there'll be a report. And what I'll do is I'll circle back, usually in about 6 months or so, and just ask them how things are going, if they've done any of the recommendations that were on the report, and if they've noticed any improvement in whatever the issue was. Some of the issues are break-ins or loitering or theft or drugs. It just depends on what the space is, and then what the issues are, and what recommendations we can make to provide a safer property for the residents and for the owners.
Okay, and so Josh, over to you. You had actually put us in touch with Constable Hunt and introduced this CPTED to us. And so what prompted you to seek review?
Yeah, definitely. Also, thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Essentially, what had happened was that one of the properties I manage, an owner came to me and had mentioned that they had noticed some suspicious activity in the visitor parking lot. So I reached out to Ottawa Police's non-emergency line and started the conversation there. And in talking with a constable who was assigned to come take a look at this situation, he mentioned that this service existed and that it was free of cost to condominiums and properties. So I reached out to Matt, and we kind of set up a time where we could meet on site and go through some things. And similar to what Matt alluded to earlier, it was a great experience. Matt came to the property, we walked it. He pointed out in the moment, this is going to be a potential trouble area. These are some concerns, and these are some ideas that he gave to the community to help improve those areas. Matt then went back and put together the report and sent it across to us. And I was able to sit down with the board of directors, go over the report, and kind of look at the different areas that were identified.
Okay, so as you had mentioned, this involves a site visit, as well as you're reviewing not only the interior of the property, but exterior components of the property as well.
Yeah, at the very beginning, Matt brought up, where are the trouble areas? So, the one that sparked it was the visitor parking, which is outside. So we kind of started there and worked our way into the building. And then, questions were brought forward of have you ever experienced stuff in this area? Or have you had issues with trespassing? Or have you had issues with, homeless people sleeping in the stairwells, things of that nature, so that we can kind of gear the report specifically to that building. So it was very informative as a whole, but we also were very detailed specifically to the building in question.
Okay, and if there were areas of, let's say, of concern around the building, in many cases, this could be we've seen dollar signs whenever we think about making changes at a property, being condo managers and being directors. So how do you address some of those expenses potentially that you'd have to address?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Some of the stuff that Matt and I worked on when we were looking at this one property in particular was there were some landscaping details that could be done. So the board of directors was already exploring some options with regards to their landscaping contract and landscaping for the next year. Well, now we can take those ideas and bring it to our landscaping contractor and say, we'd like to add some shrubbery to create a bit of a more direct walkway, or some of it was increased lighting. So I can work with my building staff to see if we can get lighting at a decent cost for certain areas. And sometimes it was simply just changing the type of bulb that was in a lighting area, so it's more intense and a little brighter for areas that obviously aren't going to cause concerns to the community as a whole. But in this one property, there's an entryway to the enclosed parking that's lit right now by a yellow bulb. So it was recommended that we kind of bring that to a more intense LED white, make it uncomfortable for people to kind of hang out in that area. To reduce the amount of pedestrians that are kind of just hanging out in that area. So some of the recommendations were a bit bigger in nature in terms of fiscal responsibility, but a lot of them that were brought forward were manageable, and we were able to kind of triage okay, these are the things that we would like to do this year. This is how we can incorporate some of the stuff into further projects, some with regards to access control and cameras. Sometimes there's not a budget for those items immediately. So we can look at how important it would be to the community to have these items and how can we incorporate it into a budget. So it was really beneficial for those conversations with the board of directors.
As well, you had mentioned about triaging certain changes to the property. And so in your report, Constable Hunt, would you rate which are more priority to take care of, which are of concern?
Yeah, so let's say there's an audit done and there's 5 recommendations that I make. Usually, I'll talk to the owners about what the priority would be in my mind. They might have a difference of opinion based on what the board of directors wants to do or maybe can afford to do right away. Some of the costs, like you say, are quite costly, and some of the recommendations not so much. I mean, it might be just a couple of signs that say no trespassing, no loitering, private property, that sort of thing. Not nearly as expensive as maybe upgrading a video surveillance system, we'll say, right? So obviously, when I check back in 6 months, I'll go through, and usually I would say that the properties haven't been able to do all the recommendations on that list, and that's totally understandable. But even if they have done one of them, I think the property is just that much safer in my mind than it was before. It's never going to be perfect. I always say that, just because we come and do this audit doesn't mean that you're going to be exempt from crime. I think everybody understands that. But if we can just pick away at it, then it shows the residents of the building that, the staff here do care about my safety. And it also, shows the would-be criminals that are heading to the property, this is a pretty engaged property. People are calling the police when there are issues. I see now they've put up video surveillance, they put up signage, they've done some landscaping. Like, they really care about the property and the safety of the people on it. So maybe this isn't the best spot for me to go and conduct my illicit activity. That's the hope. Or maybe it just becomes more difficult for them to do so, in which case they usually move on to somewhere where the care factor is quite a bit less.
As well as the report, Josh probably backs your and the board's decisions to making these changes or implementing, introducing new items on the property as far as signage, surveillance, or expenses that that they would consider.
Yeah, I would say, having the report was very beneficial, because then I could have the opportunity to include it into one of my either, monthly board meetings, or have a special meeting depending on the severity of the information provided. And we could go through with tangible information saying these are things that, Ottawa Police sees on a day in and day out basis. And these are ways that we can actually make positive change towards, reducing that. So, again, using the example of the property where Matt and I met, there was some issues with trespassers making it into the visitor parking area, because the way to come from the one street to the other, that kind of created like a shortcut. So now everybody wants to use that kind of area as a shortcut to get from point A to point B. Well, now some people kind of veer off and they're doing the illicit activities in that dark area of the parking lot. Well, we can do some landscaping where there's some shrubs there, so it's not as easy to just make that a shortcut. That's a relatively simple fix to reduce that amount of foot traffic that's going through that area. So to be able to have the expertise of the Ottawa Police and seeing this stuff day in and day out, they know what they're looking for when they're on the property, and Matt has that experience when he comes to site. And then having that report and being able to provide it to the board of directors, and then again, if the board would like to share it with the owner community, like those things are options for condos once they receive that information.
And normally, Constable Hunt, when you go to again, a condominium corporation, let's say a building, who usually does accompany you with the site audit that day?
Okay, so it'll depend on the property, but I don't like to have too big a group going along just because it takes a lot longer to conduct the audit. You know, 2 others is probably ideal. Possibly in this case, it was Josh and I, just the 2 of us, which was fine. Sometimes they'll include, you know, a maintenance worker, custodian of the building, or they might include somebody from the board of directors, president, vice president, um, as long as they're familiar with what the issues are, and as long as I have permission to be on the property. Those are my 2 big things. I need somebody there who can give me permission to take photos and be on the property and make our way around. And I need somebody to tell me what the concerns are, what the issues are, you know, somebody with an intimate knowledge who can also get me into the nooks and crannies of the building, the shared space, the gyms, the parking garage, the party room, like all the different. So access is a big factor. So as long as we have all that covered, I think 2 people. Sometimes I've had 3 or 4 with me on the audit, not usually more than that. And sometimes, like in the case of the one I did with Josh, it's just the 2 of us, which is fine as well.
Okay, and you had mentioned when we were speaking earlier that some of these suggestions that you're putting into the report are not grandiose suggestions. So they could be, you know, small adjustments and to the property that make a big change.
Yeah, some of them are even trying to train human behavior a little bit, which is very difficult. But you know, putting up a sign that says, you know, don't hold the door open for strangers or for people coming into the building, or you know, when you leave the garage, could you wait for the garage to close behind you before you drive away so that nobody sneaks in? So these things that some people will totally comply with and others not so much, but it's just that notice that they send out with a monthly newsletter or whatever the condo does to its residents, just to let them know of events, activities, changes, construction, whatever. Just reminding them, you know what, take the valuables out of your cars. We have had a couple of break-ins, vehicle break-ins in the garage. You know, could you please try to let the garage close behind you before you drive away? Don't let people kind of piggyback you on the way into the building, etc., because we have had some problems. So just letting residents know that, you know what, could you just try to curb your behavior a little bit and it'll keep everybody safer. There's no cost there. It's just communication and being honest and upfront and saying, you know, we have had some issues. Residents are probably going to find out about it anyway. So you might as well be open and upfront. Yeah, there's been a couple of vehicle break-ins. So, you know, please take your valuables out of your car and make sure it's locked, and that sort of thing. And if you see something suspicious, please report it. And here's how you go about doing so.
We have a comment in our Q&A saying that we have had a community that had the CPTED done a couple of years ago and found it to be valuable exercise, and were able to implement the recommendations. Sterling recommended for all condos. So that's a great endorsement for sure. Thank you very much, Suzanne. Much appreciated. So as far as the reporting goes and a review goes, we've spoken a lot about buildings, and we always think about buildings and breach of security into a parking garage. But if you live in a townhouse community, can this type of audit be beneficial for that type of community? Let's say they have a common space and roadways, maybe a playground or a pool on the property.
Absolutely. So we don't necessarily have to look at, you know, people's residence. That might not be where the issue lies. It might be the common space, like you said, the parking lot, or if there's a park right beside the townhouse that, you know, maybe the sight lines are not very good between that and the park, or maybe there's hiding places in and around the property. Maybe the lighting's just poor outside of the townhouses, and people feel unsafe, and, you know, if their cars are getting broken into or whatever, it's hard to see that this behavior is happening. So we can take a walk through the townhouse complex, and I have done quite a few complexes, and really never set foot in anybody's residence because the issues are more exterior. The property, the maintenance of the property may not be good. So there's garbage everywhere, there's graffiti or etc. And the property looks like an eyesore and it's treated like one. Realistically, people are doing drug deals in the parking lot because the lighting's poor, because they know that people aren't likely to call. So it might take something like setting up a community group, a neighborhood watch of sorts, or setting up some sort of patrol of their own property, and just letting people know, okay, here's how you make a report online, and here's how you make a report over the phone. Here's the information that we need, and here's what we need to set up a neighborhood watch, because some people aren't aware of that, and in some communities that works really well. So if they can get the buy-in of the community, and in a townhouse complex, sometimes that's good, especially nowadays when people are working from home. A lot of people are working from home, so they are home and they are seeing stuff happening, and they're able to report it. That's our big thing, trying to get people to report issues that they're having.
Absolutely. And so I just put into the chat a link for Ottawa Police for reporting. So as far as reporting, I know people are hesitant about coming forth and filing a report. Why would you stress that this is important to file a report? And when do you file a report?
So a couple of things why it's important, because if there's issues on a property, let's say it's a condo and there's been numerous issues, but nobody's filing reports. When I go to say, you know what, we need some extra police patrols of this location because they've had problems with X, Y, and Z, and then I run on the system, our criminal record system, and there's no reports, it doesn't give me much of a leg to stand on to say to officers on patrol, hey, could you do some extra patrols? Well, why? There's nothing going on at that location. Whereas other buildings are reporting things to us every day. We're constantly there. And that's unfortunate, but I'm really happy that they're reporting things, because then when allocation of resources comes to mind, it just gives us a little bit more of a leg to stand on. So some of the things to report, theft into vehicles, some people notice their vehicle's been broken into, really nothing was taken, or maybe it was just some loose change in there. And they say, you know what, I'm not going to bother reporting it because there's no way I'm going to get the change back, and there's nothing that's going to be done, or I left my door unlocked, or whatever. We'd like you to report it. It doesn't take long. You can do it online. You can do it over the phone. Or you can do it through your community police officer, but it just gives us an accurate view of what's going on a property, especially when I come to do a CPTED audit. And that's how a lot of times I'm referred to people. The community police officer will say, well, we do have this service and it's free of charge and it only takes about half an hour of your time. So if you're interested, I can give you the contact for the CPTED officer myself. And people say, oh, geez, I didn't know that even existed. I didn't know that was a service. It's free of charge. That's even better. You know what? I am going to reach out to Matt. That's great. So we make the link that way. And it all came from them filing some reports. And then they say, geez, we're going to contact our community police officer, which is right on our police website. So you can see who the community police officers are. And then they contact, and then all of a sudden now I'm entering the equation, where like they probably didn't even know that my service existed. So that's the nice part. And then we can make some recommendations as to how to keep things safer. The residents are happier, the staff there, it sounds like there's been some good experience with CPTED, so that's nice. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone. And there's no charge for the actual service, which is nice. The recommendations might come with a charge, but that's something we can look at sort of down the road.
Yeah, and I can
So-
just kind of reiterate there what Matt was saying is that the way that Matt and I met was through the reporting system. So as a property manager, when I receive notes from the community on things that are, suspicious activity, break-ins, a lot of times those may come to a property manager first. Some people will reach out and say, this happened to me while I was on the property. What can I do? For me, the first thing is always, have you filed a police report? Have you started that? And then we can look at the actual building aspects. And in the case where Matt and I met, that was exactly it. Suspicious activity. Did you file a police report? The owner was like, no, I haven't yet. And I said, can you please file a police report and I'll do some of the stuff on my end. And then that's kind of how Matt and I met together. So I would just want to reiterate that, making those reports online may seem tedious at times, but building that system, building that information for all of the resources that may use it in the future, it's insurmountable what that can actually do over time.
So if a community is looking at setting up a neighborhood watch, would they contact their neighborhood police station, or not station, but a community group, or how would they look at doing that? And I know this is a little bit of outside of your your authority or department, but how would they initiate something like that, a neighborhood watch? Does the police department offer like an information session or anything like that?
So the best bet for that is to contact your community police officer that deals with your neighborhood, whether it be Canada, Orleans, wherever you live. On our police website, ottawapolice.ca, you can go into crime prevention, but you can also go into community policing, and they will have a list of the police officers and the areas that they cover. So let's say it's Barrhaven. There's a community police officer that covers Barrhaven. So their contact info will be right there. You just simply get a hold of them and say, we are interested as a community in setting up a neighborhood watch program, which does still exist. I saw one of the questions on there. It does still exist. And there's criteria for setting up a neighborhood watch that the community police officer can help you with. My role is more of a, go to a property and make some recommendations to keep it safer. The community officer is the liaison between the community and the police service, and they will help you with things like a neighborhood watch and setting one up and letting you know what criteria you need to set up a neighborhood watch, and then how it works, how reports can be made, et cetera, et cetera. And they could probably speak to a community. Chances are they could attend in person and speak to the community and say, here's what neighborhood watch is all about. And if you're interested, then I can help you set one up. And then there's signs that need to be requested through the city, et cetera, to say that this neighborhood is a neighborhood watch community, so that people know, which is kind of a good deterrent to crime as well. When people see, oh, if it's a neighborhood watch set up here, this is a pretty engaged neighborhood, so they're likely to report suspicious behavior, et cetera. So you know what, maybe I'll go and do my business elsewhere. So it is a nice deterrent because the signs are clear, and you've probably driven around Ottawa and seen neighborhood watch signs in different communities. But there are criteria that must be met, and the community officer can help communities with that.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to change avenues a little bit here to touch on agent status. So can you explain, Constable Hunt, about agent status?
Yeah, so that will be another thing that the community police officer can hook you up with. But I always suggest, when I go to a property, let's say a condo, because that's what we're talking about today, I ask them, first of all, do we have an access code to get into your condo in the case of an emergency, which is very important. Maybe it's a code, maybe it's a lockbox, whatever it is, something that we can put on our system. And as well, do we have agent status on the property? What is agent status? It's just us simply being able to act on your behalf for two things mainly: the Liquor License Act and the Trespass to Property Act. Those are generally the two biggest problems that people have, trespassing onto their property, and then Liquor License Act, which means drugs, alcohol, and stuff like that. So we are able to act on behalf of the owners of the property, rather than having to get a hold of somebody at 3 a.m. and sort of ask them what they want to do with the people that we've apprehended on their property. Okay, somebody's broken into the garage and stolen from a few cars, and we actually apprehended them. So we are going to charge them with theft and trespass them from the property on behalf of the owner. So if people are interested in that, and a lot of people have taken us up on this, but there are still, I was explaining to Shelley earlier, there are still people out there that do not like the police. I know that's shocking to everyone on here, but it's it's just the reality. So they do not want to equip us with any more power than is necessary. So they are not ones that are interested in this agent status program. But I'm thinking for the great majority on here, this might be of interest, and it's again just a form that you fill out that you can see here in front of you. The community police officer will help you with that. It stays on file with our service, so that the patrol officer that goes there at 3 a.m. gets the message from our dispatcher well en route that this property has granted us agent status, and the officers can act accordingly on the property. It doesn't mean we're not going to let the owner know what's going on in their property. It just means it may not be necessarily that 3 a.m. call of what they want us to do. They've given us permission to do what we do when we find somebody breaking the law on their property.
And I'm sure the directors that are on this webinar right now, and Josh, you as well, could really appreciate not getting that call at 3 o'clock in the morning to deal with an intruder, and to give a little bit of that authority to the police department as well.
Yeah, like the way that I would kind of explain it for some of the directors here who may not have a lot of experience with that is, in a high-rise complex that has a concierge, that borderlines on security, it's kind of a similar concept where that security now acts as an agent of the corporation and can, do the things that need to be done. Now, obviously, between security and police, there's a major jump, but, a security officer, security guard can, make an arrest on the property under the Trespass to Property Act, and then essentially they turn it over to the Ottawa Police, and the Ottawa Police make their options. But for communities where there isn't a security guard on site, like it's that private property kind of concept. So by providing with the Ottawa Police this agent status, they now have the ability to come onto site, act on behalf of the corporation, and take care of things that would fall under those two categories that Matt mentioned, the two acts that he went. The main one that I've dealt with is the Trespass to Property Act. Well, now they have the ability to assist the community and bar people, so they can't come back. And if they do come back, they're now in breach of more legal issues, and it kind of creates that defense system for the community. So for the properties that I personally manage, they are under agent status, so that if in an event that during regular business hours, after hours, wherever it may be, if police are required or called in by somebody of the owner community, they know how to get into the building. They know that they can act on behalf of the corporation, and then they also have my contact information, so that when those incidents start going, as long as it's not 4 a.m. and you're calling me for somebody that's loitering, those types of calls can come through.
There was a question in the Q&A about how do we confirm if our agent status is still active?
I was just reading that question. That's a great question. It will remain active unless you revoke it. So if it takes over with new property owners and they don't support the vision of agent status, then they would revoke that status. But my understanding is it will stay active on our system. So we have agent status until you tell us we do not have agent status anymore. And that's fine too. We can cancel that if it's not working out, or somebody else takes over and doesn't want that to be part of their portfolio, we'll say. But yeah.
Definitely. One thing to note would just be that any changes, so for example, access codes, lockbox codes, contact information, whenever those things are changed at the community level, just remember to update Ottawa Police Services, specifically with access codes and contact information, so that when they're on site attending to potential emergencies, we're not fumbling with trying to get into the building. It's simply a matter of here are the codes and things like that. And so for all the directors that are on the line today, just touch base with your property manager and make sure that any of those changes have been noted and kind of pushed through there. And that goes for all emergency services.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh, that everything has to be updated, as well as for the managers that are on the line and directors too, is to inform your fellow directors that there is agent status at this property, so that it doesn't come as a surprise if the police do take action that they're authorized to.
Definitely.
And I think just looking through some of my notes here, so if there is agent status, again, a Constable Hunt, the police would be provided with the information. It would be on file of how to enter the property, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's on our premise history. For every property has a premise history, and it will be disclosed to the officers when they attend that yes, we do have agent status. The buzzer code for the front door is 1234, whatever it is. And any residents in the building that could be a problem for us that we've dealt with in the past can also be flagged on our premise history. So just so you know, on the 12th floor, there's a person who, suffers from a mental illness or whatnot. And before they've done something to the police when we've come, and just to give you a warning and kind of an accurate view of what's going on. Some buildings, this list is quite extensive. Some buildings, not so much. So it just depends on where you're going. And the officers leaving or heading to the call generally know, because it's their zone. So they generally know what the issues are. And is this a property that I come to often? Or is this sort of just, something's gone on, just, like once in a blue moon kind of thing. So either way, it's just nice to have some information as we attend. Like Joshua says, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's hard. We used to have to kind of try to get somebody to open the building for us or force our way in, which is not ideal. So whoever was A on the alphabet, the first one on the list was constantly getting that buzz, to try to let us in. And then we were just going down. So this saves us a lot of time and energy in actually getting in to deal with whatever the issue is.
Excellent. Very important, to provide the correct information to gain access. So a lot of information that was covered today. We have CPTED audits, neighborhood watch, and agent status. Joshua, do you have anything else to add to this conversation today as far as key takeaways?
So one of the big things that I always try and promote in the communities that I'm involved in is trying to have that active conversation. A lot of times people are either, and Matt kind of alluded to it a little earlier, it seems as like either it's an inconvenience or I'm not going to be recouped for any of these losses. So what's the point? But I always try and create a community where you bring that forward, like whether it's talking with your fellow owners or neighbors in the property, making those police reports online is a great service, a great tool. You can literally do it while you're having a cup of coffee. I've had to do several myself in my personal world. But having that ability to create that community awareness is very valuable on a property. So just keeping the communication open and making sure that anytime that you have those questions, there are those resources for you to go to. Matt alluded to the community officer for your area. don't be afraid to reach out to them. They have email addresses. That's how I initiated the conversation. I simply emailed them and said, this is what's going on in the property. You know, a report should be coming in. What else can we do? And, you know, it was a couple days and I got a response that was set us up for, I mean, look where we are now. So something as simple as that can make big changes on a property. So don't think that your small issue can't have big change.
Thank you, Josh. Matt, I see that you were looking at the Q&A, so go right ahead.
Yeah. So I totally get that. Sketchy people say they're the police to enter. That's another reason why the code for us to just get in and avoid that is so valuable. The other thing would be, you know, how do you know that it's the police? Again, if you know, if you're able to come down and check out for yourself, then great. If not, you can ask the police what their badge number is, what the phone number of the police service is, or you can ask them a skill testing question. But at the end of the day, if there's an emergency that we need to get in and we can't get in, then we're going to have to get in. So, you know, it's tricky in that sense, and I get it. You don't open the door for anyone. So if there's a way to provide a lockbox or a code, that just avoids that altogether.
Yeah, so to touch on that a little bit from a management side, is a lot of times for door entry systems where, you know, it's, you know, buzzers, and sometimes those will have codes for maintenance and stuff like that. We can actually set up individual codes. So it can be a code in some situations, depending on obviously the equipment in the building, but we could set up a code that's specific for emergency services, you know, stuff that's specific for building maintenance. Same thing goes for lock boxes. You can have a lockbox in the building where it's only an access fob, and it's only a code that the emergency services would use. I mean, you know, Ottawa Fire, I almost said Toronto Fire there out of habit. Ottawa Fire, you know, they have their lock boxes for that very reason on some buildings as well. So there are ways that communities can set up access procedures and policies at the board level to make sure that the people that are gaining access into the building are the ones that you want.
Well, thank you both gentlemen for joining the discussion today. A lot of good information, a lot of good takeaways for our attendees. I would like to thank everyone for joining today, and please join us next Thursday, October 28th at noon. Our topic is well-being for residents and our aging communities. Our guests will be our own CMG manager, Kim Renwick, as well as Sarah Bercier, who is the Executive Director for the Council on Aging in Ottawa. It should be a very good conversation next week. Lots of resources as well will be discussed. Again, the CMG team is proud and honored to serve the board and the owners of your communities. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining today, and have a good afternoon. Take care. Goodbye, everybody.